There we are.
This is the Market Fire podcast. I am Danny Deals, and as always, I'm joined by the big man of real estate. This is the podcast where we run down the hottest business stories of the day. We're going to start off today by talking about the UAW and their demands. Uh, they're going to make you go back to the office, or you're going to lose your job. That's why several homes in my neighborhood have gone up for sale. Can't say I'm upset about it. They can all go back to San Francisco. I don't care. Elon Musk is going to force you to drive a Tesla and
No,
probably force you to eat the bugs and live in a box. I don't think these are going to be any of your options. Silicon Valley investors, they're going to build a utopia, Northern California, baby. Ah, this psycho. And of course, our good friends over at MGM. The resort is back online, but you still can't get into your hotel room.
Yep.
It blows my mind that how easy it was for them to get hacked. And if we have time today, we're going to get to a bonus story because I'm such a watch nerd. I want to talk. We're a little late,
Danny is a
but
watch nerd,
Rolex has
definitely. He is a collector and an avid. Yeah.
yes. And so I wanted to jump into the story. If we have time, we'll get into it. Let's get off. Let's start off on this first one though. The United Auto Workers have gone on strike the first time in 88 years. The
No, no, no,
UAW,
no. They went on strike in 2007, 2008.
yeah.
As
If you
an,
let me finish my
I
sentence,
apologize. You said first time in 100 years. I'm like, wait a minute.
that they've gone on strike against all three companies at the exact same time.
That is true. That is true.
Okay,
Last time it was only Ford and General Motors. Yes.
correct. Okay.
Yes. But the UAW, the United Auto Workers Association, actually is not just auto workers. They have grown beyond that into several other smaller hospitality based type of.
Oh,
But it doesn't.
yeah.
The point is their membership is even stronger now than what it was. But if you
Well,
remember the 2007 2008, it led General Motors into bankruptcy.
yeah. So here's what when you say that they've grown past just representing auto workers.
Mm-hmm.
To me, here's what that means. The UAW has driven out their customer, right? So they have made their customer their business is representing auto workers,
Oh, okay,
and
yes.
in the United States, the landscape of manufacturing. With the Here's the one thing: foreign car companies cannot import pickup trucks into the United States.
Right.
And there's something called the chicken tax that prevents that. And so what's interesting is uh, the one thing that is keeping them afloat is the American love of pickup trucks.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the greatest selling pickup trucks in the country is built here in Texas by non unionized workers. And there is a growing groundswell of foreign companies. Volkswagen's out in Chattanooga, Mercedes out in Alabama,
Well, and
BMW
Toyota was the one you were just referencing, built here in
in
Texas.
Texas.
Right. Yeah.
There's plenty of auto manufacturers building automobiles in the United States in right to work states that aren't forced into unionization agreements.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been Nissan factories, for instance, where the UAW has tried to organize and the workers resisted them. The workers are like, no, thank you.
Well, and that was the big Starbucks story here in the last year, right? Some Starbucks have gone union, some haven't, which is a whole nother ball of wax because Starbucks is
Yeah,
owned all by the Starbucks family, right?
right.
So how they
Schultz.
individual stores, I know the Schultz family, but I
Yeah.
just say Starbucks, right? So um, the how
Howard
individual
Starbuck owns
stores
all these. Yeah.
how do individual stores are able to unionize and not the entire company as a whole because they're all owned by anyway, I digress. I have been look, historically I am 46 years old. There have been times where I've been pretty anti-union as a thought process. I am kind of middle of the road now because I believe that Unions were formed for a reason a very long time ago, right? To create healthy conditions, safe conditions for different kinds of working environments. Look, okay, we've all seen the pictures of New York being built back in the day and these people
Yeah,
just
and
sitting on rafters and stuff like that. That's why
right.
unions existed, right? Like, come on.
And,
We have to provide these people some kind of safe environment. You can't just kill a guy one day, replace him for next to nothing the next day because there's a whole bunch of poor people that need money. Look, so there was a time and place for unions. Now, fast forward all these years, some unions, Teamsters, United Auto Workers, stuff like that, have become very powerful, and the people that serve on these unions have become very bloated as far as what it costs to
yeah.
support that union. Go ahead. I can see
Well,
you
no,
have a
I
thought.
just well, I mean, listen, I think all of us, everyone here knows my, socio-political philosophy. It tends not to lend itself to being pro-union. Now, I don't, I think that unions can and should exist. I think that they should look like something a little more like an insurance agreement or an insurance policy that a worker goes out because you're paying union dues, right? You're paying, and in some states, I
See,
used to work.
that's the problem I have is union dues. That's the
Yeah,
problem I have.
so like my thing is I used to work and live in Minnesota. Minnesota is a heavily pro, they call themselves pro worker, but what that just means is pro union.
Pro
Now,
union.
in the
Yeah.
like you were talking about how the last time that the workers went on strike, it caused General Motors to go bankrupt. And in that specific it wasn't actually Ford and General Motors, it was Chrysler and General Motors that they were striking against. And in
Mm-hmm.
that specific strike, they're like, hey guys, here's a picture of our workers leaving in the middle of the day to take a break and smoke some cannabis. Now, I'm not against that, but I'm just saying if that's against the worker policy that you leave in the middle of the day while you're on the clock, and then guess what happened? The United Auto Workers, when Chrysler went bankrupt, the United Auto Workers ended up with a piece of Chrysler. So the labor union ended up owning the company, which means the labor union became management, in
Right.
which is completely confounds the concept. The whole point is the labor union is supposed to represent the worker because they have no interest other than the workers' rights and the workers' well-being, but instead they became management, and in so many ways they tied up fiat from the acquisition. They required these huge payouts, and right now the workers are demanding their own printing press from the Federal Reserve, the right to print trillions of dollars every year, private jet access. They're also requiring that that all of the auto companies hire robots to do the job so they can stay at home.
Well, look, okay, so again, before we get into specifics of this particular one, I
Right.
believe in collective bargaining, right? I believe that people should
I
be able to
don't.
get together. I don't believe necessarily in what we call unions. For example, exactly what you just described, right? These unions are beat up. Very few people make the decisions for very lots of people, and that facilitates corruption. That few people can be bought and sold, and then they're making decisions
In
for the everyday person. I want to be able to control my own destiny. If I want to
right.
make more than the person next to me, I should have the ability to bargain for that.
And unions, my major beef with unions is that they apply academic, not realistic, uh, fairy dust ideas to working, which is, hey, if a guy has been here for 20 years, he has seniority, he must know more than the guy who's been here for 5 minutes.
No.
And the reality is, that's not how this works,
You and I have
right?
talked about how I don't know exactly when it happened, but we decided that we were going to pay people for time, not for knowledge or production.
Right.
And it's insane. Again,
Yeah.
why I have a problem with unions is they've decided that a guy pushing a broom is worth X, whether that guy pushing the broom is it at all worth it? Is it at all
Uh,
productive,
like
or whatever?
the guy pushing the broom, but it's not touching the floor,
Right.
right? He
Exactly.
should get paid as much as the guy who's sweeping the floor at 2 times the rate.
Mm-hmm.
So all of that aside, this particular thing is they're asking for a 40% pay bump, which isn't, when you look at it, they're going from 30 something dollars to 40 something dollars. I'm going to be honest with you, in the current economic environment, I don't think they're being too, I mean, like, that's not a, 40 something bucks an hour. What are we talking about? 80, 90 grand a year? And then most of these auto workers live in Michigan. So Megan Whitner gets a cut. And their governor in that state took the state from a right to work state back to a union state. So the worker no longer has the
Well,
ability. It's like, here's what I look at it. It's like,
unions do what they're asked to do by the union, so that becomes very politically powerful. Always has
right.
been, right?
And
So,
so the fact that in the United States of America, the top 10 political donors are the telecom companies, which are one of the most regulated industries in the world, is
mm-hmm,
American telecommunications, which is why we have some of the slowest internet. There are countries that didn't have indoor plumbing 15 years ago that have faster internet, cheaper, faster access. Like Romania and all these other countries have much faster internet access than the United States does. Estonia, okay? Can you point to Estonia on a map? But they got gigabit speeds everywhere.
mm-hmm,
So, and the number two is labor unions.
mm-hmm,
And labor unions don't actually have to deliver anything to a customer ever. They just in states like Texas, I have friends who worked at quote unquote unionized shops, and
right.
the union comes in and makes their pitch and says, "This is a union shop. You can freeload or you can pay us." And every single person I've ever known is like, "Yeah, no, I'm not paying you jack." Like,
My brother worked in the oil and gas industry and has started loading trucks when he was 18, right, or
right.
so. And oil and gas industry, very unionized,
Yep.
right, much like the trucking industry. And he was not given a choice. I mean, and he tells people the story all the time. Now, this is 20 something years ago, right?
But still.
But he was not given the choice and is still part of that union today. And there's been some ups and downs. Again, I am not trying to be a union basher. I just don't know that they deserve the money that has to be created and maintained to give small percentage of people power. I do, like I said, believe in collective bargaining, meaning only by voluntary basis, meaning I shouldn't have to pay anybody to get me and my buddies together and tell management we're not making enough money. That's what I mean by collective
Right.
bargaining agreement. That should not entail anyone getting paid to negotiate, by the way. I should
Yeah.
not have to give up my money to a union when there is no negotiating going on.
Yeah, and
Okay?
listen, my stance is that unions can and should exist, and that if they here's the thing: if you are offering value to the consumer, my cell phone, no one has to pass a law saying that someone has to make me a cell phone, right? Because I'm happy to go out there and buy one. So if you're actually offering a service, you don't need the government going around saying you have to buy this service. If someone said, "Hey, uh, sign up for my, union, and I'll get you an extra 20%, and if I don't, you get your money back," that's a gamble it's worth
Correct.
for me to make. And so I think unions should, can and should exist in a free market environment outside of the constraints of, like,
That's what I'm calling collective bargaining. You and I
yeah, like,
agree. We're just using different terms for it,
right. I'm
right?
just saying, in the United States, there's probably 15 to 2,000 pages of law demanding and demanding unionization and managing how that exists. But here's what this comes down to: if you're under the age of 50 and you don't believe that you have the capacity to become an entrepreneur, you can't work in the information economy, or you simply aren't interested in like working too hard at anything, and you just want to have a job and pay your bills and drink a cerveza at the end of the day, learn to
Go get a
speak
union.
Spanish.
We'll go get a union job, right?
No, you're gonna have to learn to speak Spanish, my friend, because what's going to happen is these jobs are going to move to Mexico because we have NAFTA, and then later it was reformed by the previous president. We have an agreement with them the North American Trade Agreement. And that agreement essentially is that I believe that if I was Ford, with the exception of building the F-150 in the United States and maybe the Mustang, and Chevrolet, Bowling Green, Kentucky, building the Corvette, with those two exceptions, neither of these companies in 10 years will be building cars in the United States because it is untenable.
Well, you know that using the word build cars in the United States is loosely translated. And what I mean by that is 60 or 70%, I don't remember the number is, of the components that are used to build any of these cars, including Toyota, including General Motors, Ford, or Fiat, any of these
Yeah.
are made in Mexico at Mexico factories, and then they're shipped
Right.
across the border, and they get put together as a American-made vehicle. But the
Correct.
components, the starters, the engines, the all the mechanical
Right.
components are made in Mexico and shipped across the border to be put together so that they can say the car, the Dodge, the whatever is all
Right.
put together in America. But they're literally just assembling those
Yeah.
products.
So and how long before Ford and General Motors and Stellantis, who owns Chrysler,
Right.
how long before they go, hey guys, why are we doing all this? Like we have to, we're promised by Andrew Yang that automation will have wiped out 110% of all jobs by July of 2023. Didn't happen. But the point is, automation and artificial intelligence are going to change manufacturing. Why, if you are Ford, Stellantis, or General Motors, why build that in the United States when you can
Well,
build it in a place like Mexico? Where listen, if I was any of these companies, I would say don't bargain with these workers. Close all of your factories, open new ones in Mexico. I would respect you more if you did it.
well, but here's the deal. And this happened back in the 2008, right? General Motors stock went bankrupt, right? And
Yeah.
even though the company didn't, because it got a huge bailout from the United States government. Now, the United States government, in hindsight, made a crap ton of money because what
Yeah.
they did is force General Motors to pay huge interest on the loans and force them to give them a part of the new entity, which was General
Correct.
Motors. So the average stockholder got shafted. The average stockholder got $0 for their stock, and then they just got to form a new company without giving
Right.
you anything. However, the government got ownership, which they then divested in eventually, and made billions of dollars on. So
Right.
the buyout or the bailout was not a negative thing, regardless of how people feel about governments giving
Right.
private companies money. I digress. The point though is at that time and right now, the reason I don't know that what you're saying can happen, two reasons. One, you would have to allow the United Auto Workers to completely disband, right? To get it to Mexico, right? You'd have to say, hey, we are literally letting go of people giving government officials millions upon millions of dollars a year. So the government would have to give up on that. And two, just like in 2007, 2008, the reason the government gave these companies and gave Chrysler before it was bought out by, Stellantis and all this, Ford's the only one that didn't take money, and they were borrowing money from just other people and got
Right.
out of it. We're able to, but their stock, if you own Ford stock, you kept your ownership throughout. Anyway, the point though is still today, like it was then 14, 15 years ago, 1 out of 5 people in America, their job is tied to the automotive industry in some way. So your American auto cannot go out of business without dramatically overnight increasing your unemployment rate.
Right.
Okay?
And what I'm saying is, what's the point of being a massive global entity like Ford, General Motors, or Stellantis if I can't threaten an economy of a country? The whole point of being
Well, but that's what I'm saying. Going to Mexico, you would literally be now. It wouldn't be 1 out of 5, but I'm talking when you talk about all the people that touch the automotive industry, the people that sell cars, to the people that deliver those cars, truck drivers. You know what I mean?
right.
All these kind of things. 1 out of 20. You can't just have that halt. Is my point,
Right.
right? So
And
it
my point is, if I'm Ford, if I'm Mark, whatever, Mark Forrest or whatever that guy's name is, if I'm Mary Barra, any of these CEOs, I'm sitting down with the United Auto Workers myself, and I'm saying, nice to know you guys. I will sign a 1 year bargaining agreement with you. We'll give you whatever the heck you want because starting 2025, everything's made in Mexico. We're not building a single thing on U.S. soil. And when anybody asks why we're doing it, I will say the United Auto Workers wanted it this way, and I would staple the whole thing to their bottom. I'd make them wear it like a clown shirt, and because
If I was going
I
to do that, I would do it in 10 years, like 10 years. So you have 10 years to abandon the idea, right? If everybody
no
crumbles at your feet and gives
give
you
them
everything you want.
you get 1 year because I want the workers to go. I just bought a house, right? And it's here's the thing. I want everyone who works to make lots of money.
Of course, I want
Okay.
everybody to
I
have all the
want them to
monies.
own houses and live nice lives.
Hmm.
But you can't get this impression that, well, they need me more than I need them. It's a symbiotic relationship. You need each other. And it's kind of like you're a guy who's married. You understand that there's sometimes where you just don't ask Mrs. the Big Man to do something
Of
because
course.
it's not beneficial to you to put her in a bad mood because
Hmm.
then it's just like and it goes both ways.
Correct.
Mrs. the Big Man knows stay out of your way sometimes.
Right.
And so I'm just saying, like,
Well, let me flip this a little bit because you said earlier the 40% they're asking for, and that number kind of has some karma attached to it. The reason they're using that number is they're saying the CEOs and board members of these companies in the last 3 or 4 years have increased their millions of dollar salaries by 40%, while your
yeah,
average auto worker is up like 9%, which obviously means they're making less money because of inflation, yada
right.
yada. My point though is Danny, do you believe that the CEOs of several companies, not just in the auto world, right, but a lot of companies are getting 20, 25, 30, 40% increases in their salary year over year as CEOs making millions upon millions of dollars while their employees year over year is dragging below inflation? How do you feel about that?
Here's how I feel about it. To use Mark Fields as the example, if they took his entire salary, not just his 40% raise, the entirety of his comp package, and they divided it up amongst all of Ford's employees, everyone at the company would get 40 cents this year.
No, and you make a valid point when you talk about the size of a company, right?
Yeah,
If the company was 10 people, right, and the CEO is making $10 million, and everybody else is making the 10 people are making
a
fifty
minimum
thousand dollars a
wage.
piece, right?
Yeah,
And then you could make that argument. Wait a minute, give us $1 million of that dollars. We'll split it. We'll each make an
right.
extra $100,000. But you're right. It is hard for large companies. However, does that CEO deserve
Well,
$40 million a year or whatever it is? I don't know what
yeah.
it is,
So
right?
here's what I would say: executive compensation has gone up across the board, and so has worker productivity. The numbers are something like, worker compensation has not really gone up, adjusted for inflation since like the 60s or the 70s.
Hmm.
And the
But
reality of that
CEO
is
pay,
has
executive
gone
level pay, has
yeah,
gone up
thousands of percent,
insanely since the early
thousands of
80s.
percent. Yeah. And here's what I would say: pays to be the boss. And what people don't grasp or understand about economics is, the great Milton Friedman, and I sometimes hesitate to call him great because he did some things that make him really not cool. But the great Milton Friedman said, everyone loves inflation at the beginning, no one loves inflation at the end. Something along those lines.
Sure.
And so the thing that rises slowest in an inflationary economy, the United States, since the disbandment of the gold standard in the 70s, I think it's 71, has been an inflation economy. Inflation feels good at the beginning because at the beginning, inflation looks like it did in Venezuela. When we were paying $2 or $3 a gallon in 2008, they were paying 90 cents. A senator from Vermont was talking about, look at Vermont, look at this socialist
Hmm.
dream, the socialist
Sure.
utopia, and now look at the socialist utopia. Now, the United States is a complex and entirely robust economy, and our um, our inflation hasn't really been. I mean, I don't know how the United States has survived this scale of currency manipulation. But what I'm simply saying is when we don't teach economics and we don't teach money in schools, you end up with generations of stupid people who don't understand that the reason their wages aren't going up is because their money is the problem, right? The
Sure.
reason CEOs can demand more money is because they're CEOs. And they can go, hey, guess what? Everything costs more money. And they can say, I'll go be the CEO because here's the
Yeah, but
thing.
by thousands of percent, like, is that real? I mean, by thousands of you
Well,
tell me the CEO other than Warren Buffett, the few that you
he's
think of,
he's
Bill
not even a
Gates.
CEO when you think
Well,
about it, but
I
okay.
but I'm
Yeah.
I'm just saying Warren Buffett,
Yeah.
Bill Gates, right?
Right.
Other than the 5 or 6 Elon Musk, handfuls of people that directly related to the success of their companies, right?
Right.
Other than outside of the 5 or 6 that everybody can name,
Right.
really is the your
Well,
average everyday CEO worth 1,000 times what that employee is worth?
so here's what I would say. That increase in executive compensation is the correct measure of not economic growth but inflation, right? Some of that is simply like we have to understand too. Like we're looking at data from the ancient world. You have to go, yeah, the guy's risk was far more mitigated because he could say to Kathy down at reception, "Nice skirt, toots," and he's not going to prison. Okay, so that's calculated into like I
We
can't.
live in 2023. They might.
Well, no, if he said nice skirt toots to a fellow, to a guy, that's fine. Like that's
Maybe the
reasonable.
guy in 2023 is wearing a nice skirt.
That's what I'm
I'm
saying.
just saying, maybe he
Okay,
is.
but what I'm saying is, are they worth that much more? Yeah, because the market's saying that. And let me tell you why, though. Let me tell you why. How many people, like when you look at CEOs, for instance, there's actually a TV show. I don't know what. It's probably on NBC. But the show is called American Auto, and
Hmm.
the CEO is it's loosely mocking Mary Barra, but the CEO of General Motors. But the point is, CEOs can jump from company to company, right? Industry to industry.
Well, and do
There's
often. They do
there's
often.
there's 100 of them. There's 10,000, 20,000 United Auto Workers. There's 100,000 people who would chop off their left leg to get that kind of consistent income in the United States of America. There are
Hmm.
blue collar workers in the hills of Appalachia. Okay. There are blue collar workers here in the beautiful Republic of Texas begging for Toyota to build a factory in Dallas or somewhere
Correct.
outside of DFW, right? Because the United States had an economy based on manufacturing for a very long time
Right.
that was
Sure.
hollowed out by certain political interests. And
Absolutely.
the long-term downstream result of that is there is a this is how middle Americans existed for generations. So the
Hmm.
reality is that need in the economy for manufacturing work simply lowers the value of every worker who is, we're not talking about building the Empire State Building and guys eating lunch on rafters thousands of feet into the sky, and 5 guys dying on the project over 13 months, which to me like doesn't seem that radical for the 30s. Like
Of course it doesn't.
5 guys is not a lot of guys,
Of
right?
course it doesn't. Yes.
I'm just saying, like, everyone died of cirrhosis of the liver by the time they were 40 anyway.
Well,
So
but
like,
we also created like OSHA, right?
yeah,
You don't have to
yeah,
negotiate safety anymore because guess what?
right,
It's required by the government,
exactly,
right? Safety is
correct.
required.
So let's take what Big Man just said and understand the worker has demanded unions to represent them. There's a cost right there. They've demanded OSHA. There's a cost right there.
Mm-hmm.
They've demanded like if you look at when they say compensation from the 60s, there's no health insurance.
Right. Or
There's no
workman's
this.
compensation, right? Like
Yeah,
that's
yeah. So you've demanded from the marketplace all sorts of goodies in a goodie bag, and then you go, but my compensation is not like it's not rising as fast as the CEO. Well, guess what? There's a million of you, and there's 100 of them. So they
right.
have the bargaining power. You don't have the bargaining power, and on top of it, the UAW has represented Ford for over 100 years, and Ford workers haven't had the opportunity to vote in a different union, right?
See that
Every,
that's the part that drives me crazy when people go they
every
are
4 years,
unions
this
should
country.
exist everywhere and everything like that. I'm like, do you realize, have you looked at the hit? And look, I know a guy that his father was like one of the big, like way back in the day,
Yeah,
and believes in it from, and I'm like, great, you are awesome for what you
yeah,
did back in the day and the battles you had to go through and the
yeah.
strikes and the hardships, all of the 100% valid. However, when you look at it as an entirety, the benefit to the entirety, because the benefit of, like we said, safety, well, that was taken over by
Right,
the national government. The benefit of workman's compensation, taken over by the states and federal government, right?
right,
So you take those two things out because they were then pushed to the government.
right.
What overall, when you look at it as an overall, I guarantee you the return on your investment of what you've invested into unions and returned is lower than you think.
Right. And I would also just add this as a parting piece, just to be a little political before we jump into this next story. Just so we're all aware here, unionization has been used in the United States throughout the Jim Crow era and in other countries
Mm-hmm.
to prevent brown people from having access to high quality, good paying jobs. I'll give you an example. In 1963, as read into the Assembly record of the New York State Assembly, uh, testifying before Congress were white workers saying that without forced unions, black workers would come from the South and get jobs that were owed to the Italian, and the
I
Irish
was going to say the Italian, the Irish, yep.
who were just a generation before weren't
Mm-hmm.
able to get jobs, and saying they're going to take the jobs of hardworking whites in the North. The Southern blacks are, and it is true. The
Yep.
economist Thomas Sowell talks about how unionization in construction wiped out black participation in that industry. Now, I'm just saying minimum wages and unions have been used in apartheid South Africa to prevent blacks from getting jobs. And that has, whether or not people, and I think it's fascinating that there are people now who are pro worker, teachers unions or something like that, who just pretend like that didn't happen. Like that isn't,
Wow.
they
That
want to
applies
talk
to a
about
lot of things. That applies
like,
to a lot of things.
but those same people want to cry about capitalism and free markets, but refuse to acknowledge that in their own history of quote unquote workers' rights, the whole concept was born from the concept that we have to prevent these minorities who we were just a generation before, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Anglo-Saxon whites from Ireland and the Dutch and not
Yep.
the
First
Ireland, sorry.
generation Americans from Western Europe.
Yeah,
Yeah. No,
and
you're right.
the Northern Europeans, right, looked at the Irish and the Italians as dirty, and the Greeks as dirty, and didn't want them working. So,
Mm-hmm.
and those same people whose parents were prevented from working created unions so that Jamal and Tyrone
Right.
wouldn't staple a couple of 2x4s together in New York somewhere building a
You are
high
right.
rise. And the impact that it's had on the black community, the black family, all of that. I'm not black. I'm not really worried about it. It's not my problem. I'm just saying that all of that has. It's not my problem. But
As
I'm just
always,
saying.
Danny's comments never represent me or the Market Fire podcast. I do want to end on this. Danny and I, regardless of how non-pro union we are, anti-union we are, we do, like Danny said earlier, want all of you to negotiate on your own behalf and make all the money.
Yes.
I want you to make every dollar you can make. If you can get your boss to give you a 50% raise, get that money.
Yeah,
Learn how to negotiate. Make that money.
One time, prior to the pandy, I had a gig, at a big company, and I was the first guy out the door, and I realized I think I negotiated a little too well. Like I negotiated a little too hard that when their Chinese division was having some problems, they're like, boot this guy first. Because I think I negotiated because like I went in
Mhm.
for the interview and they're like, so you know these three systems, and I was like, yeah. Like, oh wow, like you know them better than the people who we paid to train these systems because I had been using them for a very long time.
Yeah.
And the like I was just like, I think, I think what you're offering is great, but I think I'm worth more. And so one person sneezed in Wuhan, and all of a sudden I'm out of a gig. So let's jump into this next one.
Yeah.
Um, this is wild. Um,
Hmm.
so there's a study here, and so corporations, major corporations, are now saying you have to come back to the office. Okay, I remember my old man uh, went out and bought a new car because he didn't. He used to ride the train into his office, and in June of 2020, he needed to buy a different car because one got totaled.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, I'm going to start driving to the office because I don't want to take the train because of the thing.
Sure.
Everyone was sneezing around, and so he didn't want to take the train, so he bought a car. Never once did he drive it to his office. Never once. He went. He I think a few years later he went back to his office to have a retirement party and retired, and then never went to an office after that ever again. So that it blows my mind, but it was actually funny. One of the articles I didn't include here, big man, was that your favorite dating app, Grinder, set told its workers that that you have to return to the office in Los Angeles. 40% of the workers quit. 40. Oh
You
man,
and I have talked about remote work and going back to work for the last couple of years,
correct,
ever since post pandemic,
right?
right? And you and I said at that point, look, it's just gone. Give up on it.
Yeah, it
Remote
ain't
work
coming
is just
back,
here.
Sam.
It's taken this long, and part of one of these articles, New York is finally back at a 50% commercial
Capacity.
occupancy rate, right? So it's taken this long to get to 50%. I still believe what I said back then in that I think this is being driven not by your CEOs, even though I know there's been some snippets of some CEOs saying
Saying
certain
that,
things. I think this is being driven by middle management because it's
yes,
middle management's justification that they exist. If you don't have people to oversee in your building, what are you being paid for? Right?
yeah.
And
So
because that's your job as a supervisor is to supervise your employees. We've already proven over and over in most cases that people are at least as productive, if not more productive, at home as they are in the building.
right, and I have this study here from Monty Task or Monty Task. I don't know what it's called, and it says remote workers are 40% more productive than office workers. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but here's what I can tell you. And this is me. Let's go, big man. Can
Yep,
you hop in the Magic School Bus with me for a minute? And
sure.
can we float away to fantasy land? And Danny's going to talk about a conspiracy.
Let's do
I think that people don't want you to be free.
it. I don't know that that's a conspiracy theory. I mean,
And let me.
it's a company's job to squeeze you. Like that is their job. Like that is
Yeah.
their to squeeze every bit of work life
So
out of you they can for the
yeah,
least amount of dollars.
and so here's what I think. I think there was a CEO, may he rest in peace, Tony Hsieh, of Zappos, and his whole theory was, do we really need this pyramid structure? Let's have holacracy, which is
Mm-hmm.
just everyone's on the same level. I think that's weird. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's really
Yeah.
weird. I think you need some structure. I think you need somebody giving shape to some of this stuff. But
Correct.
here's what I believe. here's and this is we're going to call it a conspiracy. I believe that the conspiracy is that you shouldn't have too much freedom. Now, who's pulling the strings? Is it a global economic organization? I don't know. Is it a guy dressed up like a Star Trek character trying to talk to aliens on a foreign planet named Klaus something or other? I'm not going to say his whole name. God rest his soul. I don't. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying that my view as somebody who is an ardent free market person
Sure.
is that the forces outside of nature, okay, that the forces of the collective forces of corporations and government, massive corporations, are that if the individual, if the you and me, if we have too much economic freedom, too much personal liberty, it doesn't jibe well with their um with their agenda.
Well,
Now let
but
me give you an
history would
example.
tell us that's true. Even if you take the agenda conspiracy theory out of it, history has proven idle hands, right?
Yeah.
It's proven that. So,
So
look,
and let
that
me just
ties into, I don't know that a conspiracy theory, we go to school 7 hours during the day,
that's what I'm
we
saying.
sit in
That
desks, we stand in
that's not a
lines.
conspiracy.
Those are
That
the
is that
facts.
those are not just that's not a conspiracy. That was so John Dewey and Horace Mann developed the American education system so that it would profit corporations. Now here's the thing.
Hmm.
I I, I listen, I believe in a totally free market and I do believe that some people are going to benefit their lives and their families' lives best by going into an office, by being uh, somebody works at a Ford plant building cars nobody wants, like a Ford Mach E Mustang with
Hmm.
battery. It's just
And it
stupid,
looks like it looks like
a jelly bean.
yeah, no, it's
But the
gross.
point is, what I'm driving at though is, I do believe there is this is the conspiracy that massive corporations and governments don't want people hugging their children. Homes, because the people are going, I don't need public schools. My kids are going to sit at home in
Sure.
homeschool while I'm working. I'm going to put them 2 feet away from me. And when the unionized public school teacher with a rainbow, with a Takashi 69 hairdo starts saying some wacky stuff,
That
I
has
get
nothing
to.
to do with this, Danny.
But no, here's what I'm saying. They're going to spend too much time with their kids and hug their kids. They're going to go, hey, I can do this job, 30 hours a week,
Right.
but I'm not wasting time commuting. I'm not wasting money buying clothes. I'm not wasting gas. I don't have to, I can buy a car with crappier fuel economy that I enjoy. I can go buy a Ford Raptor or a TRX, and because I don't need good fuel economy because I'm not going anywhere.
Sure.
I don't
I
have to
can live
commute
three
anymore.
states away instead of living in the high cost
Correct.
state where that job is. Yada
Right,
yada.
where
Yeah.
the with and so all of a sudden the dominoes that this knocks down, right, is that and you want to joke, let's be serious though. My elementary school that I went to closed, gone. The my middle school that I went to in Minnesota, gone. It was sold to a developer for $25 million
Hmm.
because they have the school district is like, what do we do with, like, nobody wants this building. There's not enough students. Where do they all go? Right? I don't know. I mean, so what I'm saying though is the downstream consequences for you know for for the government and for massive corporations, but is that the workers just aren't, they're having too much fun. Their lives are more fulfilled, and they're working to live, not living to work. And I'm just saying this is kind and it's
And what's the long
mega.
term ramifications of that? Is what you're saying?
It's But here's the thing: it's mega corporations that are having this problem, because for you and I starting a small business, this is amazing
Oh
because I
yeah,
can now.
side hustles scare the hell out of big corporations.
And let me tell you something. A company that was recently acquired for, I think we talked about it. Doug DeMuro.
Hmm.
He's an automotive YouTuber. Churning Group acquired him wholesale. I forget. I'm trying to figure out if I have this. It was in one of our stories a while ago. But he was giving a podcast. He was doing a podcast, and someone was like, "So does Cars and Bids?" And he sold it for tens of millions of dollars. By the way, I think it was 60-some million dollars, something like
Hmm.
that. He sold the business that he started during the Panini.
Right.
And they asked him, "So where's your office?" He said, we thought about getting an office, but we started during the panini. So
Right.
here's what happened. I got 2 guys in Florida. I got 1 guy in Texas. I got 1 guy in Kansas. He hired the best workers,
Right.
right? And the best workers are like, I'm just going to stay. And here's my guess. Some guy, Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank and FTX fame. He said, one of my workers said he's not going to return to the office. And he said, I sold my condo in downtown Chicago. I bought a farm outside of Wisconsin.
Mhm.
I am an hour away. I'll come into the office if required when necessary. But I'm going to go live on my farm now, and I'm not
Mhm.
coming back to the office. And that's the story of one guy. But the point is, this what happens is when you drive work satisfaction, you drive home life satisfaction. So people are more satisfied at their jobs. They're not leaving as much. They're not turning over. And my guess is there are companies in the middle, recruiting agencies, HR firms that, hey, listen, they need about a 25%, 15 to 25% annual turnover at some of these companies because, hey, how else is Robert Half going to bring in millions of dollars in recruiting fees that they could be paying their workers, by the way?
Right. Oh, that's a whole thing. That to me goes right under that whole
So when I say it's a
United
conspiracy,
Auto Workers right union, uh, companies that get paid like that, temp companies and recruiting companies, I put
Right.
under the same anti-union thing for me.
Right,
They
they're
should not
they're
be able to exist.
they exist because of laws. That's the only reason they
They
exist.
they shouldn't exist. A company should not make as much money as you doing the work for not
Right.
working. They just found you.
Correct. It's called rent seeking and it's fascist nonsense. But the reason it exists is because the American policy on work is so confounding. It is so limiting. It is so regulated that what happens is a company comes in and says, "Hey, we'll assume the risk." So
Uh-huh.
the company that is paying workers, Robert Half, there's 1,000 recruiting companies. I used to be in that industry. It is a huge business. It makes millions and millions of dollars because what are you doing? You're taking one guy, and you're basically what happens is a big company. Let's use an example. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola has too much risk when it tries to hire workers. So what it does is it inserts another company, and that company has a management company. So there's now 3 layers between the Coca-Cola company and the Coca-Cola worker to mitigate the risk of like, hey, they fired you. So Coca-Cola says we're going to fire this worker. The worker goes, why are you firing me? And they go, we don't know. And you can't get any answers. You have no recourse. It
Mm-hmm.
prevents you from. But the point is, the government has strengthened workers' rights, quote unquote, so much so that the companies have figured out how do we mitigate this from being a risk to us. We put 3 layers of protection between us that all cost money. So the
Yep.
worker is probably entitled to a lot more money, but because the government said you get rights. Well, the corporation has mitigated your rights as a risk with 4 different layers of business. And I think that
Dell
the
perfected that. Dell, for
correct,
20 years, you could not go to work directly for Dell. It didn't exist. You had to go through the temp company that they contracted with, and at the end of your 6 month stint, you either offered a job or you went back to the temp company and couldn't come back for 30 days or 90 days or whatever it
6 months
was,
in
right?
some companies. Yeah.
And so they cherry picked after 6 months of you working
Right.
who they wanted to work for them, and good for them. But you couldn't get on any other way. So
Right.
that company that I guarantee you Dell owned a piece of, right,
Yeah.
was
Of course.
getting paid twice as much as you were. Right,
Right.
because they got paid your salary too. If you were making
Correct.
$10 an hour, they were making ten
They were
dollars an
getting
hour.
$10 an hour.
Right, and
So
instead of paying you 15, right?
right.
But look, this comes down. I don't think what you're saying is as much as a conspiracy theory as people say. I don't know that it's completely what you said. Here's what I think. It's about power, right? Intellectual power, power over the way people act. If you
Correct.
come into an office every day and for decades You haven't been
wait.
charging your company to drive to
Oh,
work.
can I
Go ahead.
can I just say what you will here? This is the part of the conspiracy that Big Man's gonna have a problem with. But big corporations have ESG and DEI agendas, right? Um, Environmental, social governance, diversity, equity, inclusion. So they're going to push that agenda on you from elementary school to college, and it's going to follow you to your corporation. And now they're afraid that you might have bad ideas about rainbow people or brown people or
See, Danny's
people
right.
who wear
This is
tiny
definitely the
hats.
problem I'm going to have with that particular conspiracy. I do
So
not
I'm
follow
just saying,
Danny
like,
down that path. That's more of
that's
his.
fine, but I'm just saying that is a part of the conspiracy, in my view, is that they can't control you if you're at home, and you're happy and you're doing your job. You might accidentally be a little more right wing. Okay,
No, I
you
think
might
the
say,
opposite.
why?
I
Why
think
is
you're. I think
you
that's
might
the
ask
right hemisphere of your brain that's telling you that. Um,
that you might start asking the question, why is gas tax 40 cents a gallon, whereas gas profits are 4 cents a gallon? You might start asking that question.
you might start asking questions. Yes, I do agree in the sense of, like I was saying, power. You realize they don't want you to realize that you have not been paid to commute your entire career. That you
Yeah.
sit in traffic every morning, sit in traffic every afternoon, that eats away your personal day, which is 2 or 3 hours in some cases a day,
Yeah.
that they
Yeah.
don't have to pay you for because you've been told that's just the way it is.
Right.
And when you work for home for a sustained period of time, you realize all of a sudden that that's 20 hours a week that you're sitting in traffic, not with your family. You don't realize that it's hard for you to look for another better paying job sitting in a cubicle at your work. You
Correct.
have there's some stigma attached to it, and you're afraid to get caught, and all these kind of things. It's harder, it's easier for them to make you believe that you won't find another job for more money, right? That good old fashioned drinking the Kool-Aid, right? At work, right? I don't want to leave
You'll
my
never
family
find.
and friends at work. You'll never find a place as good as this.
Yeah.
It's all about power and psychological manipulation, and you
Right.
can't do that from home. You
Correct.
can't do that when you're sitting at home. They need you in the office to drink the Kool-Aid.
Correct. And I know some people who are, and I think there's another thing to this, which is I think you're going to see less people retire at 65 and 66, right? Because the part that I watched my parents during the panini go through was being able to work from home meant that they were like, why would I retire? Because they want to do stuff in the middle of the day and they can't.
Yeah. Well, but look, they can't. Here's the problem. And this becomes a problem when you become any size company. We're
Right.
making decisions based on the majority, not the individual. Meaning,
Correct.
if I owned a company, which I do, but I want my individual employees to be as productive as possible, right?
Yeah.
And if you're Joe Bob and your productivity is up 40%, right?
Right.
Then I say let Joe Bob stay at home. Now,
Right.
if you're Jill Bob and Jill Bob's production has gone down by 20% since being at home
Right.
because she has 4 kids that stay at home
Right.
with her now instead of paying daycare or whatever it is, right?
Right.
And Jill's not as productive, then Jill needs to come her happy ass to the office.
Right.
That's a business decision to me. What I don't think is a good business decision is just treating everybody the same, and I've always been an advocate of not doing that, and
Right.
saying, well, Jill's less productive, so everybody has to come to the office. I think that is a dumb business decision.
And I think the problem is you, as the employer, don't really have the right because you have to equality.
There's no such thing. There's no such thing. Even in today's world, if everybody's going to the office, everybody's working 9 to 5, it is
Right.
not human nature to treat everybody the same all the time.
And-
It doesn't
and-
exist.
And let me tell you, if you hire me to work for you and you say I have to come into the office, Big Man knows this because we work together on a lot of different things. I will get up in the morning if I have to for money. Okay.
Sure.
But if you want me to be productive, don't talk to me before
Danny's
10:30.
a hooah. Danny is a anyway. Go ahead. We all are to a certain extent.
But listen, like I remember like when at the gig that I was talking about where I negotiated too hard, my old man's like, how are you gonna, like, you wake up at 10:30 every day? How are you gonna get to the office? I was in my chair by 7:30, but the point is, I wasn't really productive till 11 o'clock, probably, right? But the point is, from 11 to 4:30, I crammed in all the productivity that everyone else was doing. So
You
the
got
point
your
is,
40 hours of productivity. But again, that goes back to the mindset of getting middle management to understand the difference between hours
workers
and
and
productivity. There's a
yeah,
difference.
and so that industrial age mindset that this is a factory, this is knowledge work. This isn't a line. This isn't a factory line, right? This isn't a
Right.
production assembly line. This is knowledge work. It takes my brain. If you make my brain fart because you need me here you need the symbolism of me sitting at my desk, right?
Hmm.
And I was kicking off projects, and guess what? Guess what I heard from my lead? Nothing. I heard nothing. I was extremely productive. Then they gave me to a different lead. And then she started having meetings with me every week. And it made my heart hurt. And then all the
You
projects
became
started
less
slowing down
productive.
because somebody's asking questions. There's a company, I forget, I'll find the clip somewhere, I'm sure.
Middle management, man, will
And
kill a company
and
faster
and
than
what
you
they
think.
realized is they went to unlimited vacation, and they went to a schedule that said you have to accomplish X in a
Hmm.
24-hour block, Monday through Friday. When you do it, how you do it, we don't care,
Yep.
right? And they did unlimited vacation. And here's what they found out: their workers are 50% happier, or 50% more productive. The workers are happier, so they're not quitting, and they're taking about as much as the same time off. They're
Yeah.
not taking. They're allotted
They're
to
not taking
before.
more.
They're
No.
not taking more than the 2 weeks.
No.
They are taking time off, but they're more productive when they're at work, and they're happier workers, so they're not quitting. So here's this weird thing that happened, and the manager of this company was saying on this podcast, he's like, we realized if we treated our employees like adults, they acted like adults, and
Correct.
so I think the problem is and this contributes to my conspiracy narrative, is that society, the people who are pulling the strings of our society, don't want free adults. They want man children that are managed by people who are like, did you call your friend gay? You shouldn't have done that, even though you were joking.
Okay,
Did
again,
you
you've
did
gotten
you
off track.
hold on? Did you say something on TikTok? You're not allowed to do that. Don't do that. Did
I
you
don't
tweet something mean at Taylor Swift? You shouldn't have done that.
I don't think the I don't think the government has any problem with you being free. I think they're afraid of you being free because again, the past has told us when you idle hands, when you let
Right,
people have too much,
right.
when you let even adults, I think you can't count on 100% of adults being adults. That's the problem. I don't
No,
think it's the
I
government doesn't want you to be an adult.
no,
Or a
big man.
company doesn't want you to be as productive as possible and as happy as possible. I think they just can't trust that you will be. That's the
Right,
problem. It's a
and
lack
that's the
of
thing.
the
It's
idea of
not
human nature.
it's not their job. They're paying me money. Stop paying me if I'm not being an adult.
Right, and
But
that's where
don't,
it comes in. That company
like,
you were just talking about, unlimited right vacation or
yeah,
whatever. If a
right,
person is not meeting those productivity goals or they're
right,
not holding their way, just get rid of them and replace them
right.
with give somebody else a shot. But it's
And
become
so,
so difficult to get rid of a person that
right,
it's and guess what? It costs to train someone to get them up
new
to
and all this
speed
stuff.
or whatever.
So I
Somebody at some point has figured out that there's a number, right? Bean
right,
counters run the world, that there's a number that says it's worth more to keep a bad employee that's 70% productive than it
right,
is to go out and try to find the 5 people that it would take you to
correct,
find another
to
person that would
right.
be 100% productive.
And that's why I think, like, things like, unpaid internships, all this other stuff. I think anyways, I just think that, working is too regulated.
I
And
wouldn't have a
so
problem with unpaid internships as a norm if those interns were doing the job that they're training for. Meaning, not go get you coffee, not
right,
doing
right,
your
right, right.
bullshit
Not
paperwork,
an assistant. If
not
you're
do
not an
yeah,
assistant,
exactly.
yeah.
Not if like again, I guess I don't believe in internships. I believe in, what did we used to call them?
Apprenticeships.
Apprenticeships. That's what I believe in.
Yeah,
If a blacksmith wants, if you want to go back in the day, if you wanted to be a blacksmith, you went and worked for a blacksmith for years for free. They fed
Correct.
you, they housed you, they clothed you,
Right.
and you worked for them for free until you had the knowledge to go out and open your own blacksmith shop, right?
Or you took an iron, you heated it up, and
and took over the business, as you say. But and guess what? Most work job, manual labor jobs, you should still be doing that today. Electricians and everything else should still be doing these kind of things.
and there's let me just say, closing with this, there are TikToks after TikToks, or Instagram reels of people saying, "Hey, how do I tell someone to go screw themselves in corporate speak?"
Yes.
Well, the fact that corporate speak is a thing that you and I is a term that I can just say corporate speak, and we know what that means is, hey, as per my previous email, which is corporate speak for, hey, dickweed, I told you this 2 weeks ago. Okay, the fact that we know that corporate speak is a thing, and we understand what corporate speak is, and we know how to translate it. Okay, it's like that old movie Airplane, right? Don't worry, I speak jive. That's hilarious, by the way. We're all going to jail because I said that. But that was one of my dad's favorite movies growing up, and he didn't understand how inappropriate it was for a child to watch that because he's oblivious. But the point is that I'm trying to make here is that the fact that we know that corporate speak is a thing is evidence of the conspiracy that these people don't want you talking the way, because it's like, when you used to be an office full of men, we could just say stuff.
Okay,
But
again,
now,
you've gone too far. You could have stopped that before offices were men, and your point was still invalid. When you say things like, and the point they were men, now you've invalidated your entire conversation. You've invalidated your whole statement.
And that's why I'm me and you're not.
That's
All
right. That's right.
You want to get onto this next story?
Sure.
All right. Elon Musk,
yes,
his new product, Neuralink, is accepting. It's now been accepted by the FDA or whomever oversees
the FDA,
this.
the guy that they approve all that kind of stuff.
The FDA has approved Elon Musk's Neuralink for human trials.
Yes,
dude, the first guy who gets a Neuralink implant is going to drive down to the Ford dealer because he wants an F-150 Lightning, the electric F-150. And he's going to try to put his hand to the paper, and it's going to start shaking. And he's going to go, I really want it.
Oh, that's
I can't
great.
sign. What's happening? And his phone is going to get activated via the Neuralink Bluetooth, and it's going to order a Cybertruck, and the Cybertruck's never going to come. So
so this has obviously been around for a while. He's been testing it out on smaller and then bigger animals. He's been stepping this up.
Right.
Go ahead.
So before we get into the story, let me just make it very clear. No. And no. And
you're not signing up for the Neuralink, is what you're saying?
There's a part of me that goes, this will solve all of my problems. There is. There's a part of me that goes, this is going to fix my ADHD. Sometimes I frown. This will fix that.
It could.
This will fix the times that I feel unhappy with life. But shouldn't you feel unhappy? Shouldn't you feel frustrated sometimes? Should you have the capacity to Google things with your brain? Is Google now going to record everything that's in your brain?
Because, again, could be true.
Listen, I am so afraid of this thing recording me and in hearing something I say. But now it's in here?
Yeah.
I'm going right to prison, dude. I'm going right to prison. I'm going directly to prison, dude.
Right? 5 minutes later, they're like, oh, Danny's been up in the Neuralink. Oh, prison. Forever.
Right to prison.
Right to
prison.
Let
me tell you, this sounds crazy, but somebody's, Alexa heard someone saying something racist, apparently.
Okay.
And then would not open the door. Would not let the door get unlocked.
That sounds like a conspiracy theory that doesn't really exist.
Okay,
I'm gonna have to take your word for it, even though when it comes to these kind of things, I really can't. But because Danny does not do any research on that kind of stuff, he just likes the headline and goes, "Oh, that must be true." It's probably a tweet that he read, or an X, or an
Yeah.
excretion, or whatever they're calling them these
It's not
days.
an excretion.
So
It's a
look,
sweet.
it's
It's a sweet.
it's a
It's an
sweet.
X.
Is that what it
Yeah.
is? An X W
X.
E E T is sweet.
Correct, but pronounced with a Z. That's
No, I'm
correct.
sorry.
It's a
Tweet still sounds better. Twitter
Nope,
still.
it's a
Anyway,
Zweet now.
the
It's a
point is,
Zweet.
so look, this guy's been obviously Elon Musk. This company has been developing, and we've all seen the video of the monkey playing Pong, right, back and forth, and that kind of stuff. It's been around a long time. There was an article that came out that one of the apes had died, which it turned out to be, yes, they did die, but it had nothing to do with the. So it's like a false.
Right.
Narrative kind of thing. They've also said PETA and these companies have said these chimps and these different animals have been under harsh circumstances. That's all come out to be false, right, or whatever. The point of all of this is this is how any drug goes through the system. You start on smaller
Right.
animals and you work your way up. But to finally get the approval of the FDA to start recruiting human beings that are willing to allow them to put these things. Now, look, the idea is if we can connect your brain to an electronic device, there's obvious things that it could be used for. Danny jumps straight to cars and all of that stuff, but think about someone that has an electronic arm or leg or whatever. And so to me, that's where my brain goes first, right? A veteran that gets a new arm and can control it
Right.
with a prosthetic arm, right? Without
Right.
having 50 billion devices connected to his body, he just connects
Right.
it. Now, what Danny is saying about can it read my mind? You obviously, this is not a sci-fi conspiracy theory. The way it works is mapping how your brain is trying to tell your arm to work, how your
Okay.
brain is communicating with that Pong thing to move it left or right. So it
Yeah.
has to map your thoughts
Mm.
to
So-
control it.
June 15th, Emily Crane of the New York Post. I've now added it to our doc so you can see it.
Okay.
Amazon shuts down customers' smart home devices after delivery drivers' false racism claims. The man who owns the home is African American, and
Uh-huh.
somebody said he might have said something racist, not realizing that he himself was saying things that he's allowed to say because he's black. So I'm just saying it did happen. They shut down the smart home devices for a week. And I don't know about you, but I have a smart lock on my door at this house. So if the smart lock doesn't work, how does Danny get inside? Danny still carries a key because he knows.
Well,
I'm
you
just
would have to
saying.
say it out loud, right? Like this person
But-
said it out loud.
Yeah. So here's the thing. The HOA is already at the outside of my house being a Karen. Now it's at the inside of my house being a Karen. But now it's going to be inside of my brain. Okay. There's a lot of things in my brain that,
I still don't know that this is the future, right? Like you and I have talked about how electric cars we don't think are the future because of
Correct.
batteries and yada yada,
Yeah.
and cobalt still comes out of the ground much like oil.
and by
yada,
the
yada.
way, our good friends over at Ford and Mark Fields over at Ford said that they are slowing down their EV because they lost $5 billion on
Yeah.
it, and they're building more hybrids because that's what customers want.
Right. I don't know that physically implanting an electronic device inside your skull, I don't know that your average person's going to sign up for that, right?
Oh, I
Now-
think
now
I
I
think
think-
not only is the average person going to sign up for it, people will be signing up their children for it. Okay.
Now, see, again,
Yes.
depending on what it can do, right? Now, if you're telling me that I can download all of human knowledge directly into my brain and not have to learn it just because I have a chip in my head, then maybe. I'm just talking about brain surgery is a big deal to have people sign up for, right?
Right.
However, now there have been at some of the tech shows over in Asia and stuff like that, they've
Right.
shown these. I don't know how much these models are getting paid, but the ones that have had like Bluetooth devices put in their
Yeah.
ear so they could talk on the phone by just pressing their cheek or whatever. To me, getting Total Recall, the newer one, not the older one, everybody talked with their hands, right? Their cell phone was literally implanted under the skin of their hands. Getting somebody to put something under their hand is one thing.
Right.
Getting them to open up their brain and saying, hey, we're going to insert this into your head is a
Right.
completely different ask.
Right. And let me tell you something. this is just me saying this right here and now. And Robert, you're a father, right?
I am.
You're a father in a place full of weird people.
Yes.
Okay. You know that there are people at your kids' schools that have weird ideas about raising their kids. They have
Yes.
kids with extremely weird names.
Yes.
Okay. There are kids there who are under so much pressure from their parents to succeed at school that these kids are going to break mentally.
Correct.
Okay. Those same parents are going to go, hey, if when my kid is born, I get this thing put into their brain, they're going to have every social advantage in society. Not realizing that all they're going to do is make a kid that's so weird that no one wants to be friends with him, and he's not going to have anybody at his birthday party. So,
Isolation is as I get older, even though I love isolation, I believe isolation is to me, a fear going forward with all generations. You
yes,
already have people, look, the fact is, and guess what? The global economy is worried about this, not just the American economy, but also ask China and whatever. The birth rate around the globe is
in the West,
lowering
the
in the
birth rate in the
West,
West
right?
is low.
Is
Yeah,
lowering by an extraordinarily rate, and it's scaring the crap out of people.
correct.
Economists,
Right.
everybody, right?
Yeah.
Ecologists, everything. They
Yeah.
are all freaking out because the West birth rate has dropped
It's
so dramatically.
yeah, we're going to look like Japan, right?
Well, and
Japan,
it's already happened, right, in Asian
yeah,
countries,
like
and
Japan right now in Japan, although they do not like, Western migration into Japan, Japan just has houses that you can just go buy for $1 or they'll just give you.
well,
And
and
it's
there's
not
parts
like
of China that has empty buildings because what they thought
cities,
was going to continue to growth
cities.
was never going to grow,
Right,
or they're having worker shortage because there's no one to take over for the
right.
people that are retiring. There's no young
The,
workforce to
right.
take over from the old workforce.
In Japan, this is actually a problem where there are companies that are profitable, that make money, that cannot find a CEO to take over because younger generations aren't interested in working because the Japanese culture of work was like work, work, work until you die.
Right.
And it kind of became a culture that is, doesn't nobody's getting married. And so I think that, you
But that's how
know,
this ties back into Neuralink. If you could
right.
learn and get quote unquote your needs met information wise, right? Through pretty quickly. Let's just say this assisted in learning. Not completely, but assisted in learning. Would that lead to even further isolation of young people
Yes.
than we already have with
But
because basically he's looking at putting this in your head, right? This right here,
and
he wants this in your head, right? If you put this in someone's head instead of where right now they can set it down, right, or
yeah,
sleep at night without it,
right.
would people become more isolated and then your birth rate and everything just slows down even more?
Well, let me tell you what else it's going to do. And this isn't an argument against Neuralink. This is just a reality is that it's going to deepen the divide between the haves and the have-nots, right? Because there are kids there are parents at your kid's school who can afford to Neuralink their kid pretty easily, right? And they're going to do
Sure.
it. And there are parents at your kid's school that are struggling to keep, their kid who is growing too fast in shoes that he's not popping out. And those two people are going to meet on the battlefield of ideas, and one kid is barely going to have survived, and the other kid has the entire internet jammed into his brain. And now I'm going to start saying some stuff, and people aren't going to like it. And I know that sounds a little conspiratorial, but it's called the mark of the beast. People, they're putting it in your brain.
No,
First of
it's
all,
not. It's
second of
not.
all, in the Garden of Eden, it was called the knowledge of good and evil. It's the tree of knowledge. You're not supposed to know everything, okay? You need to
No.
not know some things because that's the spice of life is learning something new. So
That is a spice of life, yes. And look, in every sci-fi movie and thing of the future where we figure out immortality or whatever, it does divide the haves and the have-nots, right?
and for
Um,
people, I'm not a person who's concerned about the divide between the haves and the have-nots. And if it was up to me, we would increase the divide between the haves and the have-nots. If it was up to me, we would keep the have-nots in a dirtier place than the Habs. Okay, but
This is why Danny will not survive in a post-apocalyptic world. Like, he just won't.
Neuralink is not the way to do it. Okay,
I'm sorry. Look, if we could develop the technology that allows a veteran that lost their leg
limb,
fighting for
right.
our country, and he can learn to walk without years of uncomfortable pain, relearning how to walk, and he can just control his leg like he controlled the other leg, and it takes them just a couple of months to, you know what I mean, to figure it out. Same thing with an arm. I can use my fingers and arm. A guy that played guitar can play guitar again, right, or whatever. Then fine. Neuralink, great.
I'm pretty sure you just described the plot to a very terrible comic book movie that Vin Diesel was in, where he's like pale skinned or something.
Right.
I'm pretty
but again,
sure.
I'm fine with all of that. I'm just not fine with the internet being in your head, as you said.
Yeah, right? That's going to be a problem for me.
But how do you stop? We all know you can't stop technology. You can't stop the advancement of technology. So how do you stop at giving that veteran, right, legs, and stop at, I don't want Google in my head?
Right.
I don't know that you can.
The film I'm talking about is called Bloodshot. It came out in 2020, and it did have Vin Diesel in it. And it did poorly because of it when it came out, but it deserved to do even worse because it was not good at all. I don't even think you could stream this on Amazon Prime.
I liked it.
That's how bad it is.
I liked it.
Yeah. Anyways, let's jump into this next one. You ready?
I am.
Okay. A group of Silicon Valley investors have quietly been acquiring acres and acres of land in NorCal because they're going to create a utopia. No, that ain't going to work.
We have talked about this story, not this particular story, but the whole we're gonna build a utopia a half a dozen times by different companies, different billionaires.
Wait, are you ready?
Yeah,
it's called Group Flannery Associates. They acquired 55,000 acres of farmland in Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a big deal. They're going to move all the farming to a laboratory. You're just going to eat that instead. And they spent nearly $1 billion. They spent $800 million acquiring this land. And
yeah, but they've done it from a fund that has the wife of Bill Gates or the wife of Steve Jobs, right? All these. So $1 billion to these huge funds are nothing. They're nothing.
It's nothing. Yeah.
So it's not like saying, hey, they've spent a huge investment already in making this or whatever. No, $1 billion to these kind of funds.
55,000 acres is a lot of acreage, big man. You and I both know that.
It's a lot of acres. It is, but I mean, Anheuser-Busch is part of this. I mean, it's Jelly Bean Factory is part of, like, this is a drop in what would have to be a bucket. This is very similar to what's the one in the Middle East where it's the 100-mile long line, right? That has actually started construction, believe it or not.
Yeah. So here's the thing, the line is a little less scary than this, and I'll tell you why. Because MBS, like they're trillionaires, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know how much money they have or don't have. I'm not making any sort of claim here, but I think it's safe to say they're trillionaires.
They have all the money. For them, they have all the money.
Yeah, right. So for them to drop $500 billion to build the line, which is this straight, you have to look this thing up.
Look it up. If you don't know what we're talking about, just look up the line and the architect, all these drawings that they've done and whatever. It's essentially what they're trying to do here, but in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, this is what I think is interesting about this here is Silicon Valley, San Francisco. Silicon Valley is actually a city, it's a jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm.
But the Silicon Valley Greater Statistical Area, which is San Francisco, Oakland, the Bay Area, is not looking good at the moment, right? Mm-hmm. And this is often misconstrued as some sort of right-wing conspiracy. But if you go on X.com, you can just watch. There are reporters who are like, we're going to go there and report about how Fox News is being crazy. And then they're there and they're like, so we just parked our rental SUV and it got broken into. Like, okay. And the
Yeah.
city councilor, one of them is like, stop leaving valuables in your car.
You shouldn't have to.
So, what I'm getting at though is this is, as much as you and I disagree on things, we might agree here. When people earn lots of money, when they make lots of money, they start thinking that they know more than they know, right?
About everything.
About
Not just the
everything.
thing that made them successful, but
So
about everything.
like Reid Hoffman is one of the investors here. Dude, you got two things right, okay? And one of the two things that you got correct, like both of them, you fell ass backwards into money. You were correct, but you fell ass backwards into the money. Like Netscape Navigator, Reid Hoffman started Netscape
Mm-hmm.
Navigator. Bro, you won a lawsuit. That's how you won money. Like you won a lawsuit, you loser. That's how you made money.
Well, but look,
You don't know anything about life, Reid Hoffman. You're a freaking loser. You made your money and then you took that money and created LinkedIn. Dude, LinkedIn is the most scornful product that exists in all of social media.
sure.
We're live on LinkedIn right now. Praise be. But it's the most scornful, disgusting, useless product in all of humanity. So Reid Hoffman knows nothing about society. Reid Hoffman, I remember he did an interview on the now defunct Pando Monthly or Pando Daily, which was run by this putrid woman. Anyways, the point is, he said, well, my next goal, because he was just selling LinkedIn to Microsoft, he said, well, my next
Mhm.
goal is to be a public intellectual. And this to me is the fruition of him being a public intellectual. And I think what you should be is a public moron and a private intellectual. Reid Hoffman is a doofus. I am hereby challenging Reid Hoffman to a boxing match, except I'm bringing a baseball bat. Okay, continue.
Danny knows this. I am not a religious person,
Yeah,
but I will say this aligns with the religious thinking. I
this is
don't think a
satanic.
I don't think a utopia can exist because people are flawed.
Yeah,
Therefore, no idea of any of these cities that they're talking about can
right.
exist because it's just not human nature. It's the only way this could exist, and this is the essence of even what we were talking about, every sci-fi show of the future. The only way
Right.
that this exists is if the rich people live in that utopia and everybody else gets bussed in to work for them. That's the
Yeah.
only way it exists, because the
Right.
idea of people are going to live and work
Now,
and shop in the same place has never existed and will never exist because
now
the people that
that
live there can't afford to work there.
now that is a utopia I'd be interested in. The poors live elsewhere and they're brought in by EV bus. I'm
It,
okay with that.
but that's the only way it exists. The
Yeah.
idea that they're going
Yeah.
for, that's the only way it exists, and it
And and
just can't.
and let me tell you something. I cannot wait for all of these people to have to eat their own hat and lose money. If there is one thing I revel in, it is when progressive thinking wealthy people, which to me is an oxymoron, okay? The whole point of getting wealthy is so that you do things that are bad for everybody.
No,
Okay, the whole
that's not
point
the point of getting wealthy.
the whole point of getting wealthy isn't so like great, your children are provided for, multiple generations are going to be taken
Sure.
care of. That's all beautiful. But the point to me of getting wealthy is to piss off poor people, not to give them a house, okay? Is not to give them a place to live. Now, because these rich people have the wrong idea about being rich and they're using their wealth, they're flying around in private jets, but they're not living in nice homes. Like, listen, what do we want in a billionaire? We want you to shoot dick rockets into the sky, and we want you to say, "Hey, Finland, can you please uh, deconstruct this bridge so my yacht, which is the size of a small city, can get through? And then I'll just pay to reconstruct the bridge,
Right.
which is what Jeff Bezos did." Now that's what I'm looking for in a billionaire, not Reid Hoffman going, "Hey guys, what we're gonna do is
See,
we're gonna
you would
pay
definitely be
55."
Jeff Bezos. See, that's the problem.
Yes,
It's you would be Jeff Bezos,
correct.
and we need more Bill Gateses. Even though it's a lot
Nope.
of people say,
We,
yeah,
we need less Bill Gateses. We
no, we
need
don't.
less Reid Hoffmans.
You have all that. The
They're
problem I have
disgusting,
with all of
vile
these,
people.
the problem I have with all of these projects is
Yep.
they're all of this money, the $1 billion they've already spent with this, right, and stuff
Yep.
like that, could be used so many other places that would benefit so many other people.
They could have they would have done a better job investing in a private police force running around San Francisco, knocking the needle out of people's hands.
Right, and that would be more useful paying
And Billy clubbing
100,000 people
somebody,
that their job is to
and
run around
yep,
knocking
and
needles
Billy
out of
clubbing
arms.
somebody who's trying to take a dump in the middle of San
Yes,
Francisco on a street somewhere. I feel bad for all of those people who are addicted and they're
100%.
living on the street. I'm empathizing with them. I really am, but I'm also going. I don't want to live in a place with human crap on the ground.
Sure.
I don't want to live on a place with hypodermic needles somewhere. And if that's the kind of environment that's created, I'm so empathetic towards your addiction. I want you to get help. But at the same time, you took a crap on the public streets, and now we're going to beat you with the billy club. That's reasonable. That's fair.
Like, you
okay?
knew that was the ramification. You chose to
Yeah.
still shit in the middle of the street. Here it is.
Correct.
I get it.
Here's all
I
I'm
get it.
saying. You can do one thing, but we have to be able to react in a reasonable way. Now let me tell you something. If Reid Hoffman personally was running around San Francisco, billy clubbing the unwell who are addicted, and he was doing that, I have a lot more respect for him.
Then
I
it
wouldn't bring a baseball
gotcha.
bat 2-hour upcoming boxing match.
I get it. That's the problem I have with these kind of stories. It's just money could go more useful so many other ways.
You want to do these last two stories, or should we call it?
Well, no, let's do at least the MG one because I find it hilarious.
Okay. MGM Grand, a massive resort company.
Yeah. They own like 5 hotels in Vegas, right? Like the Excalibur, the MGM, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. All of the MGM got knocked off line. Because they got hacked. Now, they got hacked by a phishing scheme.
Yes.
Best.
Yep.
You deserve it.
A scam that's been around for the entirety of the internet, folks.
Correct. And now I'm going to quote the big man here, so nobody get upset when I say this. The big man often talks about old whites. Now, I don't care about this issue at all.
Old whites.
But this is an old person. This is the
I guarantee you this was an old white at the casino.
Yeah.
Guarantee you this was an old white at the casino. Okay? They hacked him through a phishing scam that then turned into what we call ransomware, right?
Yeah.
We've all seen it on some TV show of a hospital or whatever, right? That your system's locked down and pay this and we'll let your system back. You have it back.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of big companies, and I'm sure that they have insurance for these kind of things so that they can pay it. But obviously, MGM could afford, I don't know, they never published and very rarely in real life do they publish what they gave because they don't want the next person to use that as or whatever. So I don't know what they paid, but it scared the living crap out of them because somewhere about 7 days into this, MGM paid.
Yeah, so...
and they didn't stop.
Little known fact, what's interesting here is that the United Auto Workers now represent several hackers.
That's not the truth.
And that's not the truth, but how long before the UAW is like, we also represent...
Just shut down the line. The line.
Correct.
But look, this lasted 10 days. This is not something that, hey, we were hacked yesterday. We got it all figured out. We're done. It's over with. And not only, look, everybody keeps printing these headlines that MGM reports a cyber attack ransomware. They didn't just hack the hotel. If you happen to be staying at one of these hotels at the time, they accessed everything that had access to their network. Your phone, your phone's data, bank accounts of people that were staying in the hotel have been cleared. It was, nobody's writing about the probably thousands of people that this has affected.
And let me tell you, what's fascinating about this thing to me is you would think that a corporation the size of, I think MGM is owned by Caesars. Okay. You would think they would be spending 10, 20 million a year on security because not just physical security, you would think they'd be doing trainings.
Sure.
Like, hey, don't touch anyone on the bottom. Also, don't, I think it was as simple as they called the guy who they hacked and said, hey, there's something wrong with your system. We need to verify. And the guy coughed up the password.
But this is my point. The guy, look, the old white that fell for the scam, I don't know, male or female, whatever, but I guarantee you they were old white. Old white that fell for this scam was not a securities expert.
And
Okay?
they
The
should be. And
MGM
like,
probably does spend tens of millions of dollars on cybersecurity. Probably does. But I don't
right.
care how good your cybersecurity is. All a hacker needs is a doorway in. And that
Yeah.
old white goes, hey, here's my password. You now have access to everything.
Yeah, and I think that there's a docu series on Netflix about hacking, and the one guy who ended up doing a lot of podcasts after that went up is a guy, and he basically was like, "Listen," and you would look at him, and he is your age probably. He's an
Hmm.
old white from Kentucky, not an
Hmm.
old white, but a middle-aged white from
Yeah, a
Kentucky,
middle aged white, yeah.
and he talks like a guy who's from Kentucky, and you go, "This is not what I think about when I think about a hacker." And his whole thing is like, "I don't hack, I social engineer,"
Hmm.
right? And so it's about creating an environment that makes people feel comfortable. It's a sales trick, right?
Well, because look, and again, not to get too tech nerdy or whatever, what they did in this hack, quote unquote, which we use improperly in today's world, right?
Right,
There was a time where things got hacked, but
right,
the technology that they use in ransomware and a lot of the things that are out there have been, these viruses have been around for 20 years. They're just
right,
reusing them. All they need
correct,
is a doorway in, and they can lock everything out. It's not
exactly,
hacking. It's
right,
phishing. That's why the word phishing, PHISI, you know what I mean, SHING exists, is because they
correct,
just need a doorway in. These are simple things. These are not the brain. This is not 1999 movie Hackers, where you have 50
right,
people typing at keyboards attacking a company, and the company has 50 people, you know what I mean, typing on a keyboard, battling
correct,
it out on the internet. Okay? That's not the way
right,
this works, right? The way this works is
correct.
you've now let me in, let me reset your password, now everyone's locked out, right?
Yes,
Okay, so
and
go
the
ahead.
fact that they were able to, um, mainstream this, uh, Brett Johnson, that's the guy's name, who I'm talking about. And the fact that he does that's how easy it was. Like you need better, you know, you need to do more security education, right?
Well, but again, does that security, yes, yes, everybody that works at a company like this, and guess what, most companies have access to data on all kinds of things you wouldn't imagine, right?
Right.
So do we need to make sure that all the old and the mid-level whites, the middle-aged whites, understand not to give their password to people that call them on the phone? Yes, we need to do better about that. However, we're not going to know for probably weeks now whether MGM was not up to date on their
Right.
cybersecurity or not, because guess what, cybersecurity is one of those things that bean counters don't like until it becomes a problem because it's a
Right.
cost, like insurance, year over year over year. Wait a minute, it's costing me $10 million a year. We haven't
Right.
used it in 10 years. That's a
Right.
$100 million that we've used zero of. And employees, we need to cut that back because we want to make more money or make a whatever. So it
Right.
gets cut. These are kind of things that get cut or lapse a lot
Right.
until you need them.
But the reality is, I saw some video from inside the casino during this time period, and it's like it's wild how they could take down. Like here's the unfortunate reality we were talking about Neuralink and all these other things earlier. Things aren't as secure as you believe them to be, right?
Mm-mm.
Every system is one goofball away from being penetrated, right? Let me even give you a better example. A foreign nation penetrated Jeff Bezos's WhatsApp. Freaking
Sure.
A.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Jeff Bezos.
Yep.
I mean, he is the old white among old whites. I mean, but I'm just saying, so he is as tech
Yep.
savvy as they should be, right?
He's as
Jeff
protected
Bezos,
with all that money as you probably could be or should be.
right? And even Jeff Bezos got nailed. So I'm just saying that the and this is me as someone who is, they always say about Gen X and millennials, we are better technologists than the younger kids because our technology didn't work. We were guinea pigs. We had
Correct.
to figure stuff out. Whereas younger generations, they all have iPhones. They don't know how to do anything,
Well, because it was
right?
user friendly by the time they came
By
around,
the time
right?
they got it, it was just like, who?
We don't even use the word user friendly anymore because it's
Right.
accepted as a mandate, right? We
Right.
used
It's
to
just like,
use the word like, wait a minute, is that software user friendly? Are we going to be
right.
able to show this to your average non techie person and they're going to be able
Correct.
to use it? It's why
Correct.
Windows still exists,
Right.
right?
And so what I would say is, for instance, I drive a vehicle from 1998 because some people say it's because I'm broke. That may or may not be true, but others believe it's because I'm paranoid about tracking softwares and vehicle black boxes.
Well,
Now,
there was a video that went viral, I think last week, week before last, and it was a parent giving his 14-year-old daughter, setting
yeah,
her in an old school truck, right, from the
yeah,
80s or something like that, and saying, okay, start the car.
yeah,
They're looking for the button, right, the start button. They've
yeah,
never
yeah,
seen a modern car that doesn't have a button, right?
yeah,
Like, okay, first of all, you're going to need the key. Well, why is there two keys on this ring? One's for your door, one's for
yeah.
your
One,
ignition. What's an
yeah,
ignition? You see what I'm saying here? Like,
yeah, 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 yeah.
this is because
I
that they grew up in a world. They now grow up in a world where everything's user friendly. Automotive
right,
cars are user friendly,
right.
right? Technology is user
And
friendly. Cell phones and
and
everything.
I was reading a tweet from a lady who was just like trying to get her teenage kids to come out of the car so she could teach them how to pump gas. And they go, "We're never going to drive a car that runs on gas." I'm like, "Yeah, you are. You're not getting. Not only are you not getting, you're not going to get a car that runs on gas. You're going to get a bicycle
I don't
because
care
you're
if you're
not.
ever going to drive a car that doesn't. You're getting the hell out of the car now
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah,
doing what I say.
yeah, yeah.
That's what's happening.
But that's you being a dad. But I'm just saying, and they're like, her kids are like, "Well, this is like the time you made us like learn how to use a payphone." I was like, "Okay, that's fair." But I mean, um,
Look,
you
they.
know, as as the universe, you know, here's what I'm learning. I'll give you an example. At my house right now, I have disposed of all of the nonstick pans, and we only have cast iron pans here. I did
Okay.
I did endless research because I'm not some hippie, okay? But there are things called forever chemicals. Okay, they're chemicals that just live with you forever.
Right.
And I do believe that they have contributed to some of the reasons why I'm not as healthy as I'd like to be.
Okay.
And I looked for every conceivable concoction of nonstick pan, and all of them have some sort of chemical in them, or
Right.
all of them like somehow. And so I go, all right, I guess. And then my dad's like, oh yeah, we took a bunch of stuff out of your grandfather's house and we did bring it down here. So go find it. There's two. I'm using my granddaddy's pants from 60 years ago. And the point is, it's just like, yeah, you scrape it down, you coat it in some butter. Like, so what I'm saying is, I do believe we're going to find a a boomerang effect of people going, I'm disposing of these old, things. Like people are going to go back to, I think there's going to be a segment of the population that goes, yeah, I'm just going to use, like, if I need somebody's password, we're going to like walk down to their office and get it. Right.
I, oh,
Um,
look. Technology's going to get better, not worse.
yeah,
Access to your information is going to get better, not worse. Good for
which is
good, bad, or
why,
otherwise.
right.
The look. Here's. I don't know whether this is good news or not, but much like we did a story, I don't know, last year, somebody got hacked. I think it was a form of the government or the state, like California or something. And then 3 days later, all of a sudden, that hacker group was found not alive anymore. Right? I think there's a lot of money to be made by hackers and ransomware guys. I don't know that MGM in Las Vegas is somewhere that I would focus to get. There are so many places that you could make money off of just left. They're going to pay you the $100,000 and then you move on to make the next one. Why
Right.
on God's green earth would you go after the MGM? Why? Because you know that the people involved at the MGM, right? And stuff like that. And the government's going to get involved in something this big. And when you
Right.
involve the United States government, or really any big government, they are
Right.
going to find you. They are going
Right.
to. There have already been a couple of different hacker groups with this that have come out and said, it wasn't us, man. Because they want no heat.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
want
yeah,
no,
don't
like,
need-
no, this was not us. Yes, this is what we do to make money. Yes, this
Yeah.
is what we do to people, but it was not us.
Hey, man, I have an entirely separate laptop. If I want to look up something, I have a separate laptop, and it runs, it runs Linux. So I'm just saying, here's what I'm driving at. I think that stuff like this is going to become so much more commonplace that people are going to go back to. There's going to be a boomerang effect where people of our generation, Gen X, elder millennials, we're going to start going, this is
Yeah,
too much technology.
but again, Gen Z is going to then, even if that was the case, which I don't necessarily believe it is, because Gen Xers and millennials elder millennials are lazy.
Yeah,
So,
that's true.
but even if we did, let's say, a small boomerang backwards, Gen Z and Alpha after them are just going to push it forward because
Right.
they'll grow up in a world where their data is everywhere anyway. There'll be
Yeah.
zero expectation of privacy.
Correct.
You see what I'm saying? So they won't have, you and I think about, again, I'm Gen X, you're an elder millennial.
Right.
You and I had this aspect of privacy, this thought process of privacy is something that it's a right. We have the right to privacy, right?
Correct.
Gen Z and Alpha generation are growing up where that's just not an expectation.
And that's not even a thought process, so it's probably not something that they're worried about, I guess.
So they will spend zero energy trying to protect their data because they will just
It's already
assume that everybody has it.
Fair enough. Well, should we do this last one? What do you think?
What is this, the last one?
Rolex acquires Bucherer.
No, that's a you story.
Fine.
Give us the gist, Danny. Give us the gist.
Fine.
Go on.
No. Here's what it breaks down to. Rolex, which accounts for, I think it's 1/3 or something like that of all Swiss watch sales, which is a huge
Makes sense.
statistic. There's one company, and it's 1/3 of the sales, which is wild.
Makes sense. I mean, everybody's heard of the term Rolex.
Of course, it's the Rolex of, right?
Exactly.
So here's what has happened. Rolex has acquired Bucherer. Now, Bucherer is the largest distributor of watches and is one of the largest chains of, and they own
in the world or
yeah, in the world. And so what's interesting is they're, like in Florida, their boutique in Florida is like 3 stories, right?
Interesting.
Yeah. So what's happened is Rolex has acquired basically Target, if you want to call it that. Like in their universe, they've acquired, maybe Target's a bad word, Walgreens, right? So here's what's interesting. It's like if Pfizer acquired Walgreens. Here's why. Now Pfizer is selling everybody else's drugs too. So what's interesting is Rolex has now acquired, the
storefront, the
for some of it's like if I'll use another example, AutoNation, one of the country's largest dealer chains that owns franchise dealers. AutoNation turns around and gets acquired by Ford, but AutoNation sells Chevrolet. They sell Kias. So what's interesting is, what happened last year? I tried to get you to report on this. Rolex rolled out their own used certified pre-owned program because they realized that the third-party market was massive.
Sure.
Now what's happened is they own the retailer that everyone else is using. So it's fascinating because a company like Audemars Piguet, a huge company, considered one of the big 3 in Swiss watchmaking, got rid of all of their authorized dealers and said, we just have boutiques now. We have our own boutiques. And I know this because I know some authorized dealers of Rolex who said, oh, Rolex is forcing us to build a boutique in our store. So it's a store within a store, but now they own
the store,
a retailer. Yeah. So they
don't even have to build a store in a store anymore.
Well,
Obviously,
exactly.
there are obvious ways that this can be abused. I would be
Hey,
interested
would
to
you
see
would you
how
would
they
you like
set
to
it
know?
up. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like, do they
because
keep this a company in a company, right? How some
right,
companies,
which is
right?
what they
Google
said.
became Alphabet so that they can have
Right,
all these other subsidiaries.
right,
Does Rolex create an entity of so and so watch
right,
watches, and Rolex just is the luxury brand?
right. So what's interesting is Rolex is owned by a holdings company called the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation. It's a nonprofit. Rolex
So, like
is
the
a Swiss.
NFL, like the NFL is a nonprofit organization.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow,
yeah.
that is some BS.
So I'm not quite sure who acquired whom here, but if it's the Hans Wilsdorf Foundation that has acquired Bucherer, this is fun because as a watch collector, a lot of us kind of hate Rolex for one reason. It's confounding to somebody because they go out of their way to make it impossible to buy their product. Okay,
Sure.
they make it a point to make their product so flippin' exclusive, and this is literally how it works. I have a friend who spends a lot of money buying Rolexes, and they go, "Here's what's going to happen. We're going to call you up randomly in random day of the week and say, we have that watch you wanted. Come pay us full price." And it's an honor for you
Sure.
to be, and that to me is so ridiculous that you have a product and you have designed it. You've designed the sales channel to be, it's an honor that we have let you buy our watch that is not even as good as uh, a Casio that you can buy that doesn't tell time as good as a Casio that you can buy from Walmart.
Well, so here I'm sitting here looking at this as, cuz I'm not Danny's the watch guy. I like watches,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
I'm not a watch guy. I would not call myself a watch guy. But the
Okay.
market apparently on this did not like it. Their
Yeah.
fear the stock since the announcement of the acquisition has fallen 30%. So it looks like their issue, the market, as far as the
Right.
ownership of stock, the market has not liked it, and it looks like
Well, no, no, no.
their
So
fear is that the Rolex as itself falls from that. Right? Has happened before, where a
so
luxury brand has
hold
been.
on.
Go
The
ahead.
the stock that has fallen that you're talking about is the Watches of Switzerland stock, which
Correct.
is the major competitor to Bucherer. Not because Rolex isn't publicly traded. Rolex is a private, not for
I get
profit.
what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying.
But so what's happened is their competitor stock took a huge dive,
Okay.
and yeah. So
Because I would think there would be a fear that Rolex owning this retailer and stuff like that, that now you're talking about me as a Rolex person going,
yeah.
okay, you're just going to mass produce Rolexes now, and it's not
No,
going to
what's
be as much.
so what's going to happen is Rolex is going to get even more exclusive because now they own their own boutiques. So, but what's interesting is, as the guy who's always wanted to buy a Rolex, I have the money, but I can't even go buy one because they're like, well, we want you to, the one that you want, we're not going to sell it to you. But if you could do us a favor, we're going to let you order the one that you don't want. And if you buy two or three that you don't want, we'll let you buy the one you want.
I've heard you tell me that before, which is I have a Rolex.
You do?
But yes, I have an antique one that was given to me by
Okay.
my father that he had bought literally over years of paying for it and then purchased it.
Well,
Like it was,
yeah,
you
I
used to
get it.
be able to, and people don't get this, and it lasted into the 80s. Um, think of what we understand as layaway with companies like Walmart or whatever. They're
Yeah.
used to it used the reason we called it book of business is because people literally used to have books that had
Right.
names in them and stuff like that. But it not only that book of business not only had names and information in it like a black book, but the reason they called it book of business is because most people couldn't afford really nice things like
Right.
suits,
Yeah.
luxury items, right, watches and stuff like that. So what a book of business was a name of a person, what the
Right.
cost of the item you sold was, and how much they paid on that item over and
Right.
over again. And that book of business did. told you how much was left on that book of
Right.
business for every person in it. So there was no limits to these things. So
Right.
you could buy a designer right suit made specifically
Right.
for you, but it took you 5 years to buy it, and then once you've given them all the money, you go in, you get fitted. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is
Right.
how poor people got luxury things. My
Right.
father did that with a Rolex watch back in the day, and when he passed away, he gave that watch to me. I don't ever wear it because I'm, again, not a big watch guy,
Yeah,
a
yeah,
Rolex
yeah.
guy, or whatever.
But we're a little late to the story. It's a couple weeks old now. I just wanted to cover it because I find the whole concept fascinating that a huge not-for-profit corporation that has a
That in itself is a story. That Rolex is not owned by a nonprofit organization.
yeah,
That in itself is a story, which
absolutely.
right up there with the NFL being a nonprofit organization,
I love it.
which I am completely against, by the way.
No,
Nonprofit
let me tell you
organizations
something.
as a whole.
Right. And let me make something very clear in the here and now. Every company I start going forward is owned by a nonprofit. None of it's for profit, baby. We're just here
Apparently,
losing money.
yeah, apparently that is what I want to own going forward. We're going to start a podcast non-for-profit.
That's correct.
Is what we're going to do, and we're
Yep.
you know, it's still going to be all pod media, but it's going to be
Yeah.
nonprofit organizations. We're here
Correct.
to elevate
Yes.
podcasting,
And enlighten.
enlighten. There you go.
Yes.
Education, right? Enlighten.
Sir, this Ferrari is for the public good.
All right, Danny. Anything else you want to say to these nice folks before we get out of here?
No, that's all I have for today.
No dumb knowledge. No anything you need to know
Dumb knowledge.
before.
Sir, I am offended at your suggestion that I would say something dumb.
No
You
words
know?
of wisdom. How about that?
No, nothing.
All right, folks. We will see you the next time around.
All right, brother. All right, folks.